Okay. Hello, everybody. Dr. Anderson asked me to give you guys a little bit of a rundown on the idea of the phobiary, the sort of fear of nature and all that kind of good stuff. And as you guys have probably been talking about, these eras, these themes, these rhetorical instruments might have sort of a peak in history and then kind of, sort of fade out, but they're actually all here all the time. They're just sort of, not as prominent as other things in certain eras. So she asked me just to talk about a few examples of how the phobiary has played out, and there are many, many more examples that I don't have time to go through. But did you just want me to go, or do you want me to do Q&A?
Can you refresh on just the four?
Yeah, so we've been developing this theory of how we talk about, how we rhetorically analyze our relationship with the natural world. And so there's the first one, historically, the oldest one is this phobiary, is this idea, and this is again primarily grounded in Western traditions, primarily grounded in American traditions, especially heavily influenced by our experience here on the West Coast. Because we have been such a media empire for more than a century, and a lot of the ways that we tell stories to ourselves and to our society has spread not just to ourselves, but to our fellow Americans, to our fellow North Americans, to our fellow planetary citizens. So the bullhorn of the Western U.S., specifically Southern California, is extraordinarily large, is almost unusually large in the history of our country, of our world, with the possible exception of things like the Gutenberg printing press, kind of thing. It's pretty amazing. So the phobiary is the first thing that's sort of afraid. And then over time, we talk about it going to the imaginary, sort of the idealized way of perceiving ourselves and our relationships with the natural world and how we should interact. And then in more recent times, we've seen that morph into what we call the dystopiary, which are the eras of a sort of additional threat, but very specific threat from things like natural disasters and stuff of that nature. And then we seem to be moving into a fourth era, which is this what we call the inclusionary, which is not as as idealistic as the imaginary, but draws on a lot of that stuff, but just includes more voices and includes a more diverse perspective and a more realistic perspective of the risks and benefits of the natural world. So that's the context I'm talking about here. As always, you guys interrupt me or raise a hand or ask me to clarify something if I'm not speaking correctly. Is that good? Okay. All right. So again, this idea. So today I'm just going to focus on this fear element, this danger element, and so by phobiary, it's this idea of aversion to nature, aversion to the environment, and the idea that a primary threat to us as living critters is nature, and this nature is risk, is danger, is the source of bad things happening to us. And so in a cultural context, we can talk about both landscapes, in other words, both places where humans might inhabit as scary, dangerous, whatever, or as different things that might go on. That could be a storm, that could be a flood. And I'm going to pause for a second because Professor Spies has brought us a treat. And he's brought us some donuts, and I don't know if you guys know this, but it's Dr. Anderson's birthday today. So now this is probably not nice to anybody that's gluten intolerant or whatever, but we got donuts. I'm sorry for donut intolerant people. But why don't we do a quick happy birthday? Ready, set, go. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Daisy. Happy birthday to you. Thank you, Dr.
I
Spees.
did. I had one on the red.
Thank you, Dr. Spees.
Thank you so much.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
So yes, you guys may, and I know you're not supposed to eat in here. Screw that. Why don't you guys have a donut? That's good. Just have a donut. Have a donut. Have a donut. I'm just saying. I'm supposed to tell you not to eat in here. Have a donut. Have a donut. All right. So pass those around, and you guys endeavor to gnash whatever you want to gnash. And I'm going to keep talking. Okay. Unless you want to say any birthday comments before we continue.
I ran a 5K on Sunday.
Yes.
Running the whole time is a big deal. I don't know how to. I think I just have to go around while you're doing this because
Okay.
This
is a very non-phobiary thing. This is a very inclusionary thing that we're doing. Okay.
I don't have any napkins in here, but.
It's because the men planned it, so there's no napkins. there's nothing clean or sanitary or anything. Okay, so again, the phobiary. Phobiary is this source of fear, all that kind of stuff. Okay, so the cultural frame, as I mentioned, it could in some cases and in some literary examples are actual places. So that's the source of the danger or the scary. In other cases, it's the thing going on, the storm, the event, that's the source of the danger. Regardless of if it's a place or an activity or an event, this idea of the phobiary, especially early on in the history of our country, strongly shapes our policy, strongly shapes how we craft our built environment, our infrastructure, and strongly influences, especially in the early days, our conservation choices. And again, the core claim here with this hypothesis about the phobiary is that that it's driven by our history, so it's what we might call historically contingent, but it's absolutely produced by the people at that time. So it's a social construct. Yeah, and I'll just say, so this not everybody reacts the same way to nature. Not everybody reacts to the outdoors the same way. And it doesn't, I'm not saying that everybody reacted this way. I'm just saying this is a big theme, a major theme at the society level. Not necessarily every single individual person, but at our broad cultural level, that's the response that we see, even though not necessarily everybody had that identical response. And this idea, as with all of these ideas, as you're reading throughout our history of how we've talked about these issues, how we talk about them to ourselves, our rhetoric of this, the art of this, how we talk about it in the news, how our politicians, our leaders talk about it, strongly influences how we behave and how we accept these things. Okay, so the first idea, and make sense so far? With everybody with their mouth full of donuts? Excellent. All right, great. Okay, so the first one I want to mention is the idea of wilderness as danger. So uncontrolled nature as very scary to many folks. And I'm putting this as the period before 1902. And again, I mentioned that before in a previous lecture. So in 1901, President McKinley is assassinated by an anarchist. McKinley's the guy that really pushed tariffs. McKinley's the guy that really pushed taking over the Panama Canal, things that might resonate with what's going on now in our country because someone seems to idolize this guy that got assassinated by an anarchist. But anyway, so he gets assassinated. His vice president, Teddy Roosevelt, takes over. So Roosevelt gets sworn in. So McKinley's assassinated or shot, boom, boom, with a handgun to his abdomen. At first they think, oh, the dude's cool, he's going to be okay. And after a week or so, 10 days, whatever it was, I can't remember, he unfortunately dies. And so they swear in Teddy Roosevelt. So Roosevelt starts in September 1901. September 1900. That's right. No, that's right. So 1901. September 1901. So I'm labeling this as the before 1902 era. So Teddy Roosevelt comes to power, and then let's just be clean and start talk about 1902 onwards. Things begin to change, and we sometimes call that the progressive era. There's all kinds of different ideas and policies that he brings. But the idea here still, I'm talking about the before Teddy Roosevelt. So I'm talking about the pre-Teddy era. The main characters that we see are things like oceans, forests, deserts. They're raw, they're dangerous, they're places that you don't want to like choose to go into again, not talking about an individual person, but at the cultural level, at the societal level. And we have all kinds of different examples. You can talk about colonial descriptions of their areas. Talk about the Puritans, who are a big influence on that early colonial time in our country. Travelogues, sermons, all that kind of stuff. And this is the sort of imagery you get, right? So this is St. Jerome in the wilderness. This is from Europe, from before our American colonies time. But the idea is very much. So here's that saint. So he's hit little teeny guy, small next to the big massive wilderness, the big powerful wilderness. There's lions. There's storms. There's all of this stuff. And humans are a little teeny tiny sliver, right? We're a small little thing, yeah.
Did the Hudson River School from the last presentation play into this?
We'll come back to that, absolutely, yeah. So, and they also, you can talk about them being pastoralism. So the question was, hey, how did the Hudson River School play into it? It totally plays into it. Totally plays into it, absolutely. And so they're in, as with all of us, we're a product of our culture, right? So we listen to the cartoons we listen to the TV shows, we listen to the radio, and that all sort of creates sort of the hard to pin down baseline from which we sort of, and the soup from which we sort of draw all of our subsequent stuff. So absolutely, these guys were influenced by that. Here's another example of this, this pre-1902 era. In this case, this is a preacher preaching to all these New England Puritans, and again, it's very much like nature is sort of behind us. It's sort of setting this kind of big scale behind us, and we're kind of a little bit trying to make our way through it. There's various things here, but I'll talk about the early Puritans seeing the New World, meaning the Americas, as this so-called howling wilderness, full of like evil, right? The wilderness is full of Satan, is full of bad mojo, bad energy, bad vibes, bad spirits, wild animals we can't control that pose a danger to us. And because of that, therefore, by definition, it's a threat to our eternal souls. It's a threat to our spirituality if you get too close to nature, right? So it's something to be avoided, to be controlled, to be set apart from. And some of the classic examples come from various preachers, but one is this guy, John Winthrop, who has a whole series of very well published and shared around sermons in the 17th century across the colonies. And he talks about this sort of divine errand of subduing nature, like the goal of what we're doing, of what all of our civilization is to sort of get our boot heel onto nature and tell it what to do. And so his most famous phrase is a city upon a hill that you probably have heard of. So JFK borrows this, and that's older than a lot of us. So the more recent example of another person that steals all of this exact terminology, lifts it word for word, is Ronald Reagan. So Ronald Reagan talks about America as being a city upon a hill, right? A city on a hill above the wilderness. It's above the fray, above the grassland, above the shrubs. It's a shining beacon above the growingness, right? It's sort of this thing you can see from far away and lead you, and others can follow the path to the city on a hill. Yeah, okay, right. I said that. And so, so the question before was a perfect lead-in. What about the Hudson River School? So here's a great example of that. So in this case, we're looking at Thomas Cole painting, a fantastic, wonderful artist, beautiful representer of school of painting, large format canvases. And so you see this in this case. This is called what's this one called? It's called View from Mount Holyoke, Northampton, Massachusetts, after a thunderstorm, the Oxbow. So here's the Oxbow, right, which is a sort of almost turning back upon itself chunk of a river. And so what we see is off to the left, we see this darkness and sort of wild nature and the power of the rain and it's dark and we can't quite get our eyes fixed on it, and it's maybe there's something in the shrubs, right? That kind of jam. And then off to the right, you have this pastoral, this idealized sensibility. Over here, it's nice. La, 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 la. Right? It's golden. It's warm. It's well lit. We can see everything. And what's here is all the trees are mowed away, or almost all the trees are mowed away, except for the few that we've decided we want to leave there. And we've sort of blessed them and said they can stay. But most of the trees are gone. It's sort of regimented. It's linear. It's more geometric, and so this is the idealized sort of side of the picture. Does that make sense? Okay, cool. Okay, and then a couple quotes. So here's how we talked about stuff in this sort of era. So Cotton Mather, the famous Cotton Mather, in 1702 talks about the devil was exceedingly, I think it should be exceedingly disturbed when he perceived such a people were arriving in the wilderness to erect a kingdom of God. So in other words, oh my God, like the good guys were coming into nature and the bad guys didn't like that. Another one is from William Bradford, another preacher, another evangelical. What could they see but a hideous and desolate wilderness full of wild beasts and wild men, the sea behind them and a vast wilderness before them? Again, this idea of danger and uncertainty in nature. Okay. Another time when this becomes really apparent is this idea of the frontier. Talking about the frontier as the U.S. sort of decides that, what we're going to do is we're actually going to push west, and we've decided the whole continent is going to be ours. We're going to clear out all those native peoples. We're going to clear out all that wilderness. We're going to clear out all those critters, and we're going to take the whole thing over. And so that's this coupling of fear and the danger. We got to suppress it because if left alone, it's dangerous. And this idea we touched on before of this idea of manifest destiny. This idea that of course it's okay for us to slaughter these native folks and plow under the prairies because God said so. And so we're just manifesting our already preordained destiny. So in this era, in the mid to late 1800s era, wilderness is, while it's still dangerous, it's really more perceived as in our way. And we need to step on it and get it out right now. So it's an obstacle to civilization. It's an obstacle to our nation becoming whole, sort of the Pacific Ocean to the Atlantic Ocean dream. The wilderness is where we have all the outlaws, where we have the rebels, where we have the guerrilla fighters, where we have the lawless people. It's where we have physical danger because we could, be attacked by a bear or something of that nature. But it's also, as before, it's a moral hazard as well. So if you spend too much time out in the mountains of Colorado or whatever, you're gonna maybe get turned or something of that nature. So the main things here we talk about in this era are this idea of manifest destiny, which is a reminder, is coined by a Colorado newspaper editorial, but really came to be, sometimes people really nail it, and this guy really nailed it. It really crystallized what was already in the air and made it very tangible and easy to talk about and move forward. So we have that. We have the railroad expansion, and that culminates in the so-called golden spike in the joining of the eastern railroads moving west and the western railroads moving east that join up in Promontory, Utah in 1869. And we have this era of massive population growth, where we go from about 17 million people in the U.S. in 1840 to 31 million people, almost double the number of human beings in 20 years, right? That's nuts. That's crazy. And associated with that, the only reason we're able to have that many more people is because we can't cram more people in the cities. They're smooshing out as we jam them in. They squirt out the side, and the side they squirt out is to the west. And so they go and displace native peoples. They establish cities. They establish more nodes on the railroad, etc. as we move west. And I already showed you this, but again, the classic image here rhetorically is this, as John Gast's American Progress, as we mentioned before, sort of borrowing again from that same imagery that we saw before with the Hudson River School of this sort of darkness over here to the left/west, right? We normally represent America looking with north on top and south on the bottom, right? So this is the west. The western is where the bad folks are. That's why we're here, right? We're all the weirdos, right? The weirdos, the criminals, the outsiders, the others, the skaters, the punks, all that kind of stuff. Off to the right is where all the nice people are, all the civilized people, all the wealthy folks, the folks from the old world. That's where they are. And so the fantastic visual representation here of all of that, from the nature side, from the human, the genocide side, from the technology side, all that kind of stuff. This really is an amazingly important piece of art. And then as that continues on, we move into the so-called Wild West, right? This frontier identity. And so here, cowboy is hero. Cowboy is the lone wolf. Cowboy is the man's man, right? That goes and tames nature, tames it with cattle, takes out the bear. The anti-hero, the guy that's out there just, living on his own, dealing with the crazy dangers of the West. Native Americans are absolutely othered, right? It's always cowboys versus Indians. It's rarely cowboys and Indians joined together to fight the aliens, right? Sometimes that happens, but only in Hollywood movies. Guns as law and power, because nature is so raw. If you can't shoot somebody and do that kind of stuff, nature will, the wildness of that natural landscape and that wild landscape will overwhelm you. The saloon is a social arena in this time. And as I mentioned before, manifest destiny, industrial progress, all that stuff, the train, the telegraph, barbed wire, all that kind of stuff. And so here's a couple quotes. These are from what are called dime novels, what we now would call, in more recent years, we call this like pulp fiction or paperback novels, or like not really romance novel, but like that sort of like idea of kind of quote unquote trashy, cheap stuff for the masses that most like fancy people like, I don't read that, but are actually very, very popular, and many people read those. So here's a couple examples. One is from this one called Captives of the Frontier in 1860. And the quote is, "The wolves were howling in the forest, and the wind was piping mournfully through the branches of the trees, as if nature herself were rejoicing in the peril of the white man who had dared to penetrate her depths." Right? And then another one, which is from some of the Buffalo Bill series of novels about Buffalo Bill. And this quote is from 1869. "The forest seemed alive with enemies. Every rock might conceal a rifle, every thicket a lurking savage, and the very wind that swept through the trees sounded like a warning of death." Right? So again, this is like in opposition to our civilized world. We have a particular variant. Is this okay? Is this making sense to you guys? Questions so far? No? Everybody's asleep? Everybody's in a sugar shock. Okay.
They're very sticky.
They're very sticky. You can't take any notes. Okay. So we had a particular funky version of this in California, which was the gold rush. And so for our gold rush, this is where it all starts, right? This little mill over here on the left, Sutter's Sawmill up in the foothills of the Sierras. And this guy basically is messing around. He's like, "What's this? This is a pretty rock," and brings in this big chunk of gold, and that essentially kicks off what we now have come to call the gold rush. Immediately goes all around the world. Everybody says, "Come here, come here, come here," and people come from all around the world to California. So that starts in 1848, and within the next year, the next season, tons of people come. That's why the team is called the San Francisco 49ers, right? So people are called the 49ers because they begin coming the subsequent year after gold is discovered. And it's a symbol of instant wealth and new beginnings. So the idea is that if you can suppress the wilderness in the right way, and you can put your boot heel on it in the right way, and just take whatever the hell you want in the right way, you can become powerful and rich yourself, right? Almost nobody does. Hardly anybody does. The people that become wealthy are the people that trick the other folks into thinking you can become wealthy, right? So the way you become powerful is not selling stuff on Amazon. That's a fool's game. The way you become powerful is you invent Amazon. That's how you become powerful. Same thing. That's why we have Levi's jeans. Levi's were created to supply pants to the miners. The people that made all the money sold shovels to the miners, etc. So they sold this idea of you can suppress nature with our tools and our things. And it solidifies California as this land of opportunity and all this kind of stuff. It's enough to overpower the myth, the fear of that phobiary. So this is a picture of San Francisco Bay. So where you and I are standing, like essentially in San Francisco, looking eastward across the bay here. And within a couple years, we have all these houses. We have all these boats. Most of these boats are abandoned. So most of these boats so humans are in them as they sail into San Francisco Bay, and as soon as you get to San Francisco Bay, most of them are just left. The captain leaves, the first mate leaves, the crew leaves. Everybody's like, we're going to go to the hills and make money. Yeah. And so much so that now that whole area becomes, San Francisco becomes the literary center of the Western U.S., because everybody comes there and everybody wants to be there, and it's the happening place, and there's brothels and banks and operas and government and all this kind of stuff concentrated in very, crazy energy. Think like Silicon Valley times a million kind of deal. And people just abandon these boats. So the vessels themselves become infrastructure, and eventually we are so destroying the natural world with hydrologic mining, so sucking off the rivers and using the pressure of the rivers to erode the hillsides so that we can look for gold pieces inside there. And then all that sediment has to go somewhere. It goes in a little stream. The stream goes into the river goes into the Sacramento dumps into the San Francisco Bay. It sediments everything in. So all these vessels that are abandoned eventually get buried in sediment. So now, this is a picture from a skyscraper being built in San Francisco a couple of years ago. As people are excavating, this is in the downtown financial district. This isn't on the beach, or this isn't in the wetland. This is in what you would walk in today and think, oh, this is dry land. We so didn't care about nature that we literally just obliterated it. So in this case, we took a bay and turned it into a salt marsh, and then eventually turned it into dry land just by our poor sediment management practices. So all this stuff is sediment. So now these guys are getting ready to build this giant skyscraper, and because skyscrapers are big and we have earthquakes in California, you got to put the footings down really deep, right? You got to dig. And so in the process of doing that, in this case, they found this old three-masted schooner, and so that's what's sitting here. So this is where they want to put the parking structure and stuff, but they had to pause for 6 months or 9 months, whatever it was, to excavate this almost perfectly intact hull of this vessel. And essentially, almost all of this red stuff is what we. If you looked at a map right now, you say, "Oh, that's land. That was wetland. That was not dry land 150, 200 years ago." Okay, so that's a little bit of frontier thinking. Then we can talk about predators, and a very powerful theme you'll see in a lot of your literature are these monsters, these dangerous critters out in nature. And so we can talk about predators, we can talk about bounties, which are a policy of a government to kill and eliminate the predators, and then outright eradication, trying to make the predators go away and not be a problem anymore. And this is all about cementing control. This starts in the has a long history throughout our species history, But in terms of our context, the U.S. literature of the environment, it really gets going sort of mid-1800s and really takes off late 1800s into the early 1900s. And so the idea here is that predators are the embodiment of the threat, of the badness, of the danger, of the scary. Moralistically, they're described as beasts of waste. We're wasting energy on them. They're horrible, and they're beasts of desolation. Their very existence causes pain and harm and all that kind of stuff. Now, have you guys read Leopold yet about the
we read the excerpt
about the green fire?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So this is the world in which Leopold is born into and sort of ascribes to early on. And his view is very much, eventually becomes, from like the passage that you guys read from the San County Almanac, changes and does not, he no longer sees it this way, but this is the waters in which he was raised, right? The policies that fuel this fearful view of, this phobiary view of predators are all about state-level bounties, which are mostly driven by the state of the territory. Federal official policy for eradication, providing funds to do different approaches to kill things. And then biological survey programs, which to you and I might sound, oh, it's great, I want to be a biological survey. But it's a biological survey to count the predators so that we know how many to go kill, right? It's not a sort of altruistic, theoretical, understanding nature approach. And one small case example would be something like the gray wolves, and I think, did you guys talk about that already, the gray wolves example in the LA Times?
We just like, if you can expand upon it, I really highlighted.
So our gray wolves so gray wolves were probably at one point, the most widely, call it like, I don't know, 10,000, 8,000 years ago, the single most widely distributed a carnivore across the northern hemisphere. So they were all over. They were in Europe, they were in Asia, they were in Americas. They were very, very successful. And when an organism is that widely distributed, they're really, really effective at living in different places, adapting to different, cold, warm, that kind of stuff. They're very, very successful. And we as a people don't like wolves, right? We really don't like wolves, right? Big bad wolf and all that kind of stuff. And so in this era, wolves are one of the things we decide are inherently evil. And so we almost extirpate them from the entire lower 48 states. As Stacy's mentioning, they are on a rebound because of our successful management choices grounded in the Endangered Species Act and other things. Certain folks that are in power right now hate that and would love us to eradicate all of the wolves again, but that's where we are. And so I'll just tell you a couple stories. What's that?
Paula had
Oh, sorry.
What did you mean by
I know that's a weird word.
Oh, sorry. Extirpate would be to remove from an area. So if we have if we have like 100 wolves on this mountain, if we got rid of all 100 of them, we'd say they're extirpated. We'd say they've been removed.
like put them somewhere else?
No. Kill them. Kill them. So that they're no longer there and they're not relocated. They are absolutely no way, shape, or form relocated. They are killed.
Like the deer.
Yes. So I'll tell you some stories about some predators. So this is what we would call a grizzly bear. This is in Turkey, and this is right before the guy wakes up and almost eats some people. That's a whole other story. But this is a big bear. This is like about a 600-pound, what we would call a grizzly bear. And this is some of our work in Turkey trying to better understand these critters and protect them. It's been an uphill struggle. Just like we in America have hated bears, dangerous, got to kill them, wolves, got to kill them. Same things in places like Turkey, although we're making some progress. And I think this is really well illustrated. So here are some baby wolves, some gray wolves. And so these are the European subspecies, but it's the same thing as our wolves. And so we started getting these wolves in Turkey in 2007. And so how we got them, while this is a modern story, I think it very much is illustrative of what went on in the in the American West in the late 1800s, etc. So my friends and I have this conservation group, nonprofit, trying to help rebuild biodiversity and support women-owned businesses, have sustainable development, all that kind of good stuff, in a part of the world that is not super common. And so nobody, where we work in the eastern part of Turkey, there's no real environmental NGOs or anything like that. The biology degrees at the universities are pretty much all pharmaceutical. They're not like ecology type stuff. So some of these ideas are very much like our American history, 150 years ago. And so these guys started hearing that we had stuff. So people would bring us these guys. So these are two little wolf pups, very cute. And in this case, they brought us 3, but one died already before I took the picture. And so the idea is the men wanting to be real men and wanting to tame nature would go out and so in the wintertime, this is a sort of Russian steppe sort of climate, like high elevation, wind-blown grassland plains kind of thing. So not a whole lot to eat in the middle of winter. So mom wolf dens up and gives birth and then suckles and keeps her little babies next to her for a few months until the snow starts to melt. She can go out and start to get rodents and things like that to feed them. And so what the manly men do is figure out where the mom is and go in and shoot her because she's in a den, so it's super easy to shoot her and kill her, and then take out the cubs. And I'm a man's man because I got a wolf cub, right? So then I'm a man, and they parade him around the village, and they say how great I am and everything, but then it's a wolf, it's not a dog, right? So a little puppy, very cute for the first week or 2 or 3, and then it's a wolf, and it starts to bite people. I'm like, what the hell? And so then they bring them to us and go, oh, we found these random animals, right? And so we would, most of them died because they were not vaccinated for things like distemper and things like that. So we eventually set up a wildlife rehab center, which is a whole nother story. But this idea of vanishing communities and sort of humans sort of suppressing, nuking, shooting, killing, eradicating is still going on around much of our planet. And so you see it with the wolves, you see it with this guy. This is an endangered species. It's called an ibex. And this is just on this guy's patio, totally illegal. This is near the Iranian border and should be illegal by international treaty, illegal by Turkish law, illegal, but it's cool. I'm a man. I can kill that sucker and have it on my deck. We see that patriarchy. We see that here. Here's a coyote kill. So this is a bunch of guys that thought it's really fun to go out and just blow away a bunch of coyotes. I should say, to be very clear for the record, I like hunters. I'm friends with hunters. I think hunters are cool. I don't think simply being a hunter makes you evil, but I would respectfully suggest this is not hunting. This is slaughtering of animals, right? This isn't somebody trying to do this to defend their cattle, or this isn't somebody doing this to get some food. These are guys that are out there drinking beer and listening to some kick-ass music and probably Kid Rock and shit. And stuff like this. So High Country News, again. So in this case, we're switching now to talk about another critter that I've worked on, which are mountain lions, big part of our story here in Southern California. And so these are examples of people that are very, very happy that they killed a adult mountain lion. And sometimes this causes controversy. This is a former NFL player who a few years ago, shot this cougar and caused some people to not be very happy with him. So let's talk a little bit as one example of predator management and how our society has dealt with these things. Is this okay? Am I going too long? Want me to stop? Okay. Okay, so this is, so Stacy and I were at Stanford University for several years before we came here, and this was a big giant painting in our museum at Stanford. It's called Palo Alto Spring by a famous painter named Thomas Hill. Thomas Hill is this guy right here. He put himself in the painting because why not? And this is Leland Stanford. So this is the robber baron, the guy that made all his money selling shovels to the gold miners, and then became our senator, and then our governor, and is sort of like, you can imagine if Elon Musk actually listened to people and actually did stuff that built things. That's what this guy was like. Incredibly powerful, ran everything. And so this is his family portrait. And so this is, extended cousins. This is Stanford University is actually called Leland Stanford Junior University. When we first went there, like, wait, we went to a junior university? Like, what the hell? It was named after his son who died as a child, and the university was a memorial, an homage to their son. What you see on the ground here, it looks kind of like exotic. This is a mountain lion. It's a mountain lion because it takes a long time for these guys to paint these giant paintings. So they kind of sketch them in. They get the faces and they paint the faces in. So that was really the focus. So this is context, right? This is context. Servant as context. Nature as squished. Nature as controlled. A lawn is the idealized nature, and the wilderness as something the kids sit on. So the adult mountain lions don't look like this, but the painter didn't know what he just did it like from some kind of abstract memory. But this is a mountain lion. Mountain lions show up in lots of different writing. That's our son when he was little in the Grand Canyon, holding up this Zane Grey novel, talking about roping lions in the Grand Canyon. Very popular adventure novel, all about, going and taking out and controlling the predator, all about going out, and the main central tension in the novel is to attack and go find the predator and kill the predator. And then just to say that's not gone, that's still part of our society. When you walk into a bar, like at the Roadkill Cafe, they have lots of dead mountain lions on the walls, like behind the Major League Baseball game, right? Because that's the best place for these guys. Very rarely do you see an accurate portrayal of a mountain lion. One of those places is here at Mesa Verde National Park, and what you see here is this is a mounted mountain lion as they actually are. Normally they're mounted as like, I'm attacking you and I'm jumping and my claws out and I'm threat. This is, if you were ever lucky enough to actually see a mountain lion in the wild, that's probably what you see. Crouching down, slinking around, sort of, hunching down, not trying to attack you, but sort of wait. They're more of a sit and wait predator. They're a jump on you and attack you. They're not like run up to you and attack you, unless they're like starving or something. They're like diseased or something. Nevertheless, these guys are still, mountain lions are still one of the most popular things in our media, etc. If you put a story about mountain lions and going after bicyclists or something, everybody will watch that story, right? So it's still this idea of very, very dangerous, and they're coming for us. And again, our literature shows this over and over again. Another example, sort of a Zane Grey story from the Boy Scouts book. Another one of these thrilling stories. Oh, the poor woman has fainted. Of course she's blonde, and of course she's fainted. And the man's got a gun, and he's going to take out the evil thing that's about to, what the hell? That guy's never going to eat her. If that mountain lion was eaten in a human, that would be some kind of diseased, hallucinating mountain lion. That's not their jam. But even now, one of the most popular things for Christmas, like how to survive, right? The how to survive guides, like how do you survive a nuclear holocaust, and how do you survive a mountain lion attack? You don't need to worry about surviving a mountain lion attack. You're never going to be attacked by a mountain lion. But yet, very, very popular thing to talk about. So if we use logic and talk about this idea of predators, it doesn't hold up. So the number of West Nile virus that you get, right, from being stung by a little mosquito, hundreds of people have been infected over the last, many years, thousands actually. but and have actually killed lots of people. Lightning. I've not updated this. So sorry, I didn't have time to update this to 2026. But last time I updated it 2022. So over the 120 odd years of statistics, about 9,600 people have died by getting struck from lightning. That sounds pretty sketch. That sounds pretty dangerous. About 4,000 odd people have been killed from having an anaphylactic response to getting stung by these wasps or bees. About 1,500 people have been killed directly by dogs. West Nile virus is only to 2021, but West Nile virus has killed almost 2,700 people. Rattlesnakes 540, mountain lions 17. But yet all of the rhetoric is the dangerous, scary predators. We must deal with them, right? And so to tell you real quickly about the history and so the question was, what do you mean by extirpation? So this is the super brief history of mountain lion management in California. So after the last ice age, when the ice sort of went over parts of California, grew and shrunk, when it expanded, it probably kicked out the mountain lions. They don't really do well on snow and frozen landscapes. So as that glacial expansion happened, they probably retreated south or whatever, and as that ice retreated, they would reinvade, come back to different parts of California. Before 1907, they were essentially just a part of life in California. So people might shoot them or whatever, but they're kind of part of the background fabric of our state. Then, in 1907, they became what's known as a bountied predator. So that's a state policy that says, I will pay you for every piece of evidence you give me that you killed a mountain lion, an adult mountain lion. And so that translates into something on the order of about 12,500 animals killed. So you had to bring in a paw, usually, could be an ear, usually there's a paw, bring in a paw, and then you get paid. So that's how you prove that you killed. How much did they pay them? It varied. So, but on the order of about like $50.
Which was a lot back in the day.
That 1960. That's a good amount. I mean, it was not. I don't know what it was in 1907, but it was not enough that you get super rich, but it was decent. It was decent. It was if you just went around killing mountain lions, you could make an okay living. Not super rich and famous on the yacht, but that was a respectable living, respectable income you could make if you were good at it. And then after 1963, they became what's called a non-game mammal, which is this weird thing. So game is the term that we in California apply to things that we would maybe call wildlife, but in the context of this is something that people would hunt, something that people would shoot. And so it became a non-game mammal. So for this brief period, you couldn't kill them in the 60s. They switched back for a few years. They became a game animal. And then we started formally using tags. And so I don't need to turn this into a conservation biology lecture, but basically a tag is an opportunity to kill something. And the idea there is it provides money for the management of the overall species. So we're going to let these guys kill a few deer so we can get money to better manage the deer population or whatever the critter is. And so we issued about 5,000 tags. You pay money for every tag, regardless of whether you actually kill the critter or not. It's an opportunity. It's a chance to kill an individual, but you pay the money regardless. And then over that brief period, people successfully killed about 118 of these guys. Okay, so where we are since 1972 to now, only in a depredation era. What does depredation mean? Depredation means legally sanctioned killing, but only if you have a permit to kill them. So random Joe Blow can't walk out and just ba-bam, ba-bam, ba-bam. You have to get what's known as a depredation permit. 1990, we passed a thing called Proposition 117 that said no more sport hunting. And also, it was a bond measure to allow money, or to provide money for people to buy habitat, to bolster mountain lion habitat, so they could have more areas to be mountain lions in, basically. And then the hunters really didn't like that. So they got together and they made their own ballot measure a few years ago a few years after, which said, actually, no, we should turn these guys back into a hunted thing. And that was Prop 197. It was resoundingly defeated. And so the bulk of Californians very, very, very decisively said, nah, we ain't doing that. And then the most recent thing happened last December 2025, when this started in 2020, but the California Department of Fish and Wildlife has recommended that we now list the San Francisco to San Diego population segment of mountain lions as threatened. That's one of the stages in endangerment because of habitat fragmentation, etc. Okay, I'll show you this now. Okay, so how much longer do you want me to go for? Okay, so I'll show you guys this guy. So this is a mountain lion pelt. This is a real mountain lion. This is from when I was working on mountain lion management up north. And this is a great example of, I think, how we perceive these dangerous predators, right? So there's a whole...
Your picture like those guys that are so nice with all their dead animals.
Okay, let's see. 6 minutes. So, short version. Was working on managing areas in and around the San Francisco Peninsula, and had this mountain lion that was causing problems coming into town. Essentially came into town and was filmed live, and the cops shot it live on television. As the cops said, oh, there's no choice. He was jumping at me. And it was literally treed by a super fat old Labrador that could barely walk, and was sitting and sleeping on a branch. And the cop that discovered him discovered him while he was eating a donut, kind of like you guys right now, and leaning against his cop car. And the TV station started filming the guy as he's eating his donut, and then looks up, and over his head is a mountain lion. He's like, oh my God. Right, so the rhetoric that came out immediately, this might sound like similar to stuff that's happening now. Oh, we didn't have any choice. We had to shoot it. We had to blow it out of the sky. My neighbor in the next office over from me was a predator expert from Mexico, and he used to dart the jaguars very easy with just a piece of PVC, and he's like, I could have talked that animal out, no problem, right? But that was not what happened, and instead the SWAT team shot the animal, and so that all happened. And there's other dimensions of the story. So I said, hey, can I get that animal? So I asked them if I could have the animal for our educational displays and interpretation and stuff, and explanation to kids and homeowners and stuff. And they said, no, you have to have a permit. You have to get it, because they're only depredation only, you have to have a special permit. I'm like, okay. And so I said, how do we get a permit? You got to write a letter to Sacramento. So I write a letter to Sacramento, and nothing happens. And so 6 months goes by. And I get an email, or I get a phone call on like a Wednesday, and like, you Anderson? I'm like, yeah. I'm like, well, you got to come get your mountain lion. And I was like, what? Like, yep, you're on the list to get a mountain lion. You got to get it, because if you don't pick it up by Friday, we're destroying it. I'm like, this is a lab in Santa Cruz, so like an hour and a half kind of drive away. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, like, what is it? It's a whole frozen mountain lion. I'm like, well, what do I do with that? I don't know. You're the one that wanted it. I'm like, okay. So I call up, and I go, okay, I'll take it. And then I get in my van, back when I had a van, and I drive the van over there, and I pick it up, this big, giant-ass frozen mountain lion. And I'm like, how did the mountain lion die? And so this is key for you guys to understand. So this is a lab that gets everything. Raccoons, skunks, whatever, and they test for rabies and things of that nature. And they always say where the thing came from and if there was a disease or a health condition. And so the technician, who's this little like intern from UC Santa Cruz, didn't know what the hell she's talking about. She's like, that's weird. There's no intake tag on it. That's weird. And I was like, what? She goes, must be a roadkill. Must be a roadkill. I also work on roadkill, that's another story. And so, and she's like, oh, must be a roadkill. We just got it some random place. Oh, okay. So I pick it up, I take it to this taxidermist in South City, South San Francisco, and say, hey, can you guys help me with this? They're like, what? I'm like, yeah, can you guys cut up this mountain lion? They're like, is this legal? I'm like, yeah, I got a permit from the state and everything. They're like, okay. I said, it's gonna take a while. And they said, we can do we can do the skin, but we don't do the bones. And normally what you do is you put them in what's called a domestic beetle colony, which is a sort of den of beetles that eat all the meat off the bones. You throw it in, leave it for a couple months, and take it out, and they're super clean, and then you can put them on display and all that kind of stuff. So I take the bones, I send the bones to, and all the places in the Bay Area had closed all their domestic beetle colonies. It just happens. There's, again, long stories about all these things. So I sent the bones back east to be processed, and that's cool. And the guys call me up and say, hey, the idea was one to reconstruct the skeleton of the mountain lion, and then also use the skin for an educational display at one of our like education centers on campus. And they said, okay, and they call me up pretty quickly, and they go, the guys doing the bones, they go, hey, just so you know, the leg is like shattered. All the bones are shattered. I'm like, oh, that makes sense, because they were killed by hit by a car, so the car hit it. So I said, do you want it? I'm like, yeah, just go ahead and do it anyway. So a couple months later, and so campus was supposed to pay for it, and I know my wife will find this shocking, but I go to give the bill to campus. They're like, we're not paying for that. I was like, what? Like, we're not paying for that. And so I paid for it, so that's why we still have it. Anyway, so I go to pick this up, and I go, oh, this is pretty cool.
We didn't really make a lot of money. Not you.
It's fine. And so I'm picking it up, and the guy says at the taxidermist said, oh, so this is the mountain lion from Stanford that they shot on a Fish and Game shot, right? I said, no. They said they took that one to Sacramento, said they cut the head open, said they couldn't have that one. And they said, well, this one was killed by Fish and Game, by state people. And I said, no, silly taxidermist, I'm a science guy. It was road killed. And so they said, no, dumbass, let me tell you what actually killed this guy. So they take it and they show it to me. You guys can pass this around and look. So if you have greasy, sticky hands, don't touch it. But so basically, normally, how you would want to kill a critter like this is kill it very quickly, right? Put out its misery, dead, boom, super fast. And so that, for a terrestrial vertebrate like this means shot in the back of the head, because then it severs your spine, you're dead, quickly, boom, boom, boom. And that's what you try to do. Most people trying to actively depredate, kill a mountain lion will use dogs. Mountain lion, as I mentioned before with the one in Stanford, these guys are deathly afraid of dogs. So even a little chihuahua, they'll like freak out and they'll like, woo. And so the dogs will tree them. The mountain lions will go up a tree, and then like any cat, they'll go up as high as they can, and they turn around, put their butt in the air, and they'll mouth towards the threat. When they do that, if you guys do this, you guys all put your hands forward, like your hands are down in front of you. What happens is your shoulder blade rocks in front. So if someone's trying to shoot me in the back of the neck, my shoulder blade, which is a big bone, is in the way. And so bullet hole, bullet hole, bullet hole, bullet hole, bullet hole, bullet hole, bullet hole. This was not a hunter. This was not an experienced hunter that would have shot one, maybe two shots. This is a person that didn't know what they were doing. So they shot boom, boom, boom multiple times. The thing that finally kills the mountain lion is a shot that goes into the skull. And so you can see it right here. So it goes in right here, and it comes out. So that was the kill shot. So the fact that it was multiple shots, that's not an experienced hunter. That is a government wildlife biologist trying to solve a problem. So I don't know this for a fact, but what seems pretty clear is what happened, 30 odd years ago, all those guys are retired and stuff now, is someone was complaining, I don't know this for a fact, this is my supposition, but someone was complaining about predators. Someone was angry about the danger and the threat of the bad, evil predator. So they called the Fish and Game folks. Like, do something about it. And they went up and they said, you know what, let's just off this sucker, right? So they shot it, and then they're like, oh good, nobody knows. And they take it to their processing facility, which normally would have been destroyed, but then there's this weirdo conservation biologist at Stanford that it automatically popped up on the list to share the next mountain lion carcass with it. And some rando intern was like, oh, gotta call that dude, hey, come get it. So it's pretty clear this was probably not the desired outcome for this individual, but it really highlights the kind of places you get into with all of this fear of predators. So the last thing I'll just end with you guys is this. So here is an example of this fear of nature manifest. Okay, so triangles here are the number. So this is times. This is from when we went back to making them, mountain lions, a depredated animal. So again, you can only kill them if they're posing a threat to people or livestock or something of that nature, right? Okay, so this is, low to high. This is 1970 to current. And so we see over time is there's more and more individuals killed, more and more individuals shot. And then the circles are permits, official depredation permits for the state saying, yes, you go see if you can kill this individual, yeah? So obviously not every single permit is successful. Sometimes the guy escapes, nobody can find him, that kind of stuff. And so generally speaking, we start very low, and as we go through time, there's more and more critters killed, but also, check it out, there's more and more permits issued. But then there's a couple of funky times. This is the power of rhetoric. This is why it's important for you guys to really understand these themes in environmental literature and how we talk about nature to ourselves. So all of a sudden there's like, what the F? And then it kind of goes down. Then it's like, what the F? And it kind of goes down. So guesses. What might be going on here? Why are these spikes in permits issued? Fear. This is the number of people. So yes, there's been more people in California on this same time. So there's more theoretically more people around. But really, Fanton is right. So it's really, there's a couple eras here. I don't know if you guys in the back can see these. But this is where we have these propositions. This is where suddenly it jumps in the media. Suddenly there's op-eds. Suddenly there's stories in the evening news. So all of a sudden, magically, there's no more, if there were really suddenly way more animals, mountain lions that were dangerous, we would see the number of killed, track with the permits. We don't. This is fear. This is societal-driven fear of the unknown, the danger of the predator. And so we see it spike at a couple different times and causes all kinds of stuff. I can also talk about fire as the enemy, but I'll probably run out of time for that. So I probably don't have time to talk about fire as the enemy.
How much more time do you need?
I'll just say that fire is also a common theme that we see. Fire is bad. Fire is fear. This gets going with for a couple different things. We have this big burn in the Midwest, in the Intermountain West in 1910, and it kills a bunch of firefighters. And we start this. This is in the wake of World War II. This looks like an army because it is an army. So firefighting becomes paramilitary. Absolutely organized like a military organization, hierarchical command structure, unified command, all that kind of stuff. Equipment that was used in the Korean War gets deployed to fight fires, all that kind of stuff. Importantly for you guys to understand, it's very, very directed to craft an enemy, to invent an enemy of fire in the U.S. So Great Depression comes along. People really get pissed off at advertising companies, what we call, the madmen, all that kind of stuff. Society hates advertisers. They see advertisers as tricking people into buying stocks, and then when the stock market collapsed, you effers tricked us, so you're evil. So advertising executives are super persecuted. They're desperate to find something. They get saved by the Japanese bombing of Elwood Beach here in Southern California, in Santa Barbara.
The Monarch Beach?
Yes. So all of a sudden, so this is the pier. So we in California, massive oil exporter, huge oil exporter, right? And a key part of our power structure in World War II. And so the Japanese know that, and they're like, hey, let's see if we can take out some of these things. So they have this little sub. It was basically a psychological operation. They pop up, they fire some shells. They basically fly over, they break a couple parts of this one oil pier. That's about it, but it ignites all this fear, right? Japanese internment, all this stuff comes from it. But in particular, one of the things that comes along is, oh my God, the Japanese are trying to set the forests on fire. These are the so-called fugu balloons. So the Japanese are very, very successful in taking out the American fleet in Pearl Harbor. Very little military in the Pacific. The Japanese Empire marches across the Pacific. And so the so-called Doolittle raid, which was this super crazy, insane bomber raid to drop bombs on Tokyo, primarily also a psychological operation. Japanese are outraged. Like, we need to respond to this. So their response are to build these things. These are hydrogen-filled balloons that they will launch from Japan up into the high atmosphere, and then the high stratospheric winds are going to blow it over to the west coast, and it's got an incendiary bomb on it, will set all the forests on fire. So these are all the places where a confirmed, most end up in the ocean, but where they landed, right? And it killed a family in Oregon, but mostly nobody died, but it was suppressed, right? The War Department did not want people freaked out, but it sparks this thing. Oh my God, the evil bad guys are trying to set the forests on fire. So now Madison Avenue says, this is my redemption. I'm going to help you lobby the rest of the citizens to fight forest fires. That's how we're going to be redeemed. And so that's what they do. So the idea that forest fires aid the enemies, all this kind of stuff. They employ Bambi. So this is Bambi. Bambi initially is a cartoon for kids, but very quickly the imagery is captured and used for anti-Japanese propaganda and anti-fire propaganda. So all this kind of stuff. So this is originally how we talk about it. So Disney originally does these anti-wildfire campaigns, cartoons and stuff. And then it becomes this, and then it becomes all this racist stuff, right? And it starts to evolve. And there's a whole story about Smokey the Bear, which I don't have time to tell you, but basically Smokey the Bear becomes a cartoon. Nature is this evil thing that we got to suppress. In this case, it's not a place, it's the process. It's fire. The fire part is the wilderness and the uncontrolled and the danger. And so that's the bear that becomes Smokey the Bear. And what that gives us is this. And I'll just stop here. I could talk about other examples, but I'll stop here. So this is 1600 to now, a experimental forest, a monitored forest in Arizona. And this is the number of sites that have fires. So this spiky thing here is number of fires, and then this is the number of fire scars. So you can look at the individual sites or the overall thing. What you see is we basically have fires, 1600s, 1700s fires, every so often, not every single year, fire sometimes. Doesn't kill the big trees, but burns them, but kind of blackens them. So when we do a cross-section, we can see the black rings. And all of a sudden, this is the world that we've inherited, right? So this was all driven by that fear of nature, fear of fire. We must actively suppress this fire because otherwise that's wasteful, otherwise that's dangerous, otherwise we can't control it. Ironically, it's done the reverse. It's made us more vulnerable to fires. So I have more to say, but I'll stop there. And so that's a few examples of the phobiary and how powerful this fear and this sort of making nature feel dangerous can be an important literary and cultural force. I wouldn't say it's the most dominant force now, but it's always there. It's always in the background. Cool?
Pause there.
Okay, we'll pause there.
So yeah, well, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And we'll take a small break. We'll come back at, is it 3:45? I can't read my watch. And then, yeah, if you want to pet the mountain lion or look at this star or ask a question, you're welcome to do so. Thank you very much for responding.
You're welcome.
And for the donuts.
Yeah, you're welcome for donuts.